You're not even on the mic.
What? No, I didn't realize we were recording.
Some men are longer than others.
I didn't realize we were.
Are you projecting with your Sephiroth sword? Just being like, what's the matter, bro? Is mine bigger?
Am I projecting currently with my Sephiroth sword?
Well, no, you know Sephiroth, the character? Am I talking over your head?
Maybe.
He's the Final Fantasy guy. His sword's literally like 12 feet long or something stupid. It's like, all right, we know you didn't have one at birth, pal. It fell off. It wasn't attached.
You've had some work done.
I'm going to bring up more albatrosses for your neck. What's the song from?
2 albatrosses around your neck.
No, I'm thinking of the... Okay, the syllables are off. I was off for it because I was trying to think of the... a blessing for your head, Mazel Tov, an albatross for your neck. Except Mazel Tov's the opposite of...
You could say that. A blessing for your head, albatross.
But it's not a blessing at that point. It's an omen for your neck, albatross. Anyways, because the funny thing is, I see things, I talk about them in a way that couches, perhaps because I'm trying to, this is it's topic laundering. I get them from strange sources and then try to pass them off as legitimate.
As your own.
No, I usually credit that it's something that I've seen, but I hide the fact that it was a very strange Twitter dialogue or from Tumblr.
Don't worry about where.
So this is topic laundering, but I mentioned the whole concept of in a past
topic laundering. Is that what you're
in a past
pointing?
episode where I talked about the idea of rather than saying in a past life, it should just be part of your like vampiric biography. Where it's like, yeah, it wasn't that I did this in a past life. I did 200 years ago. I was doing this in France. This was my hobby. But then this was the thing.
The Bronze Age of my.
But this was the thing that inspired it. Is someone was talking. There was a Twitter thing where it was like, imagine if you're living forever, vampires should really have some really obscure hobbies. And then there was just this whole thread of people discussing where it's like, someone says, "I've been making stop motion films out of bonsai trees." I've been. It's like they're like pruning the tree so that it takes the shape. But then they're like, I've been doing it since the 70s. It's 3 minutes long. I just think that that's the kind of bizarre thing that should absolutely happen. And so a bunch of people just kept doing this. It's like, I've been breeding parrots for intelligence. This is my 5th generation African gray. He can do basic calculus.
He can do basic calculus.
Someone was like, I made this tapestry all myself. I recently finished it. And they're like, this is huge. He's like, yes, 80 feet long and 10 feet wide. Originally, it was only going to be 60, but then King Arthur became a huge figure, and I had to add a bunch. And they're like, King Arthur was like a long time ago. And he's like, do you have any idea how long it takes to make a tapestry by yourself? And I was just like, this is the kind of... I sent this to you because I was like, this is the kind of thing I would be doing if I was a vampire. So I was like, would you like to see my stalactite garden? Come on, if you have infinite time.
That's brilliant.
That's the kind of thing.
Whoever said that one, that's brilliant.
That's the kind of thing I'm like, that's exactly what it should be.
Stalactite garden.
I'm just saying that was the idea that I thought. I was like, I would.
Funny.
That's my, rather, I forget the whole past life. I'm just like, yes, what would I have been doing in France in the 1600s?
Certainly not fighting, I'll tell you that.
Well, there was actually, this was a whole nother thing that I found a long time ago, was this idea of like, there should be more, vampire stories should be more interesting than just broody guy in castle tortures local village. Someone was like, you could absolutely have vampires in the First World War being like, well, I mean, I guess I've lived here for 400 years. I might as well fight. It's not like they can kill me.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's what you get with, I thought that the Castlevania actually did a fairly good job at making him a bit more complex than just brooding and nonsense.
Well, I mean, he certainly is brooding. That doesn't change, but
he's
got reasons.
He wasn't only that.
But see, I appreciate even the aspect where it's like, for the most part, yeah, I would just have this giant castle full of scientific stuff that I'm just like, yeah, I'm curating. Again, I'm already a fan of this whole concept of like, I just curate random knowledge and stuff to carry through the generations. So if I'm alive to oversee it that whole time, it'd be even better. Imagine the clarity of the notes.
Would it actually be better? Because you would watch the degradation of your own work and just go, you son!
No, but you'd be able to fix it if you're doing it that whole time.
Would you?
Yeah, because you'd be able to restore it better in the present moment.
Human condition far better credit.
It's the whole, stitch in time saves 9. It's like part of the reason stuff gets destroyed is because it's been setting for so long. Whereas it's like, if you're actually there to be like, this book is starting to come apart, I'm just going to rebind it, rather than like, okay, yeah, it now fell apart and there's pages everywhere. Now someone else is going to have to rebind it. They're not going to be able to do it as well as...
Ripped my new binding. I will...
All I'm saying is...
rip you into the next universe.
There's a whole bunch of these random vampire Twitter threads where someone was like, imagine if you were a vampire and you're in some museum being like, that's mine! I was wondering where that went! Some locket from like some thing where it's like, this was mine! I lost it! I thought I lost it in France in 1645! I'm just saying those kinds of things. I think about such things.
What brought you down on this?
I don't know. I saw this random
vampirism kick.
I don't know. I saw the random post. Well, I've always had an interest in the stories that are like the effects of immortality, just because I think it's a fascinating metaphysical question.
I think you and I have talked about this.
If I would have one caveat, which is I can kill myself, because the whole idea of like. Because the main argument of like, could you live with sort of the weight of outliving everyone and whatnot? I'm like, the idea that you would be trapped with never being able to die and like literally you could like see the heat death of the universe and still be alive. It's like that starts to feel torturous. But it's like if I could live for like several centuries or 1,000 years or something and just be like, all right, I feel like I'm done. I can just off myself.
So you want to be Methuselah is what you want to be?
What?
900.
Yeah, but
he got close.
I'm saying to be able to be like, it's not that I am cursed with never being able to die. It's just like I'll be able to die when I want.
Sure.
Just to be like, I'll do all the things, and then once I'm done with all the things that I've wanted to do, I'll be like, all right, well now I might as well go. There's no point in sticking around here now that I've done everything. That's more. So that would be my one caveat. It's like, oh, would you have eternal life? I'm like, this would be if you could give me this one caveat, then probably. It wouldn't be as agonizing a decision as many people act like. I understand the whole concept of like, well, what about outliving the people you love? It's like, well, that's going to happen anyways.
Really
There's going to be people in my life that die.
Rather than saying, it's like Solomon's like, yeah, I want to be the wisest person on earth or in the world. It's like, okay, that's sensible. That makes sense because you're a ruler and everything. But why not just ask for eternal life?
I actually think there's an element of. I mean, you could make a very Jungian analysis of it, which is, of course, what I'm going to do. Because it's essentially the knowledge that the best thing you could have is to know what the best thing you could have was. So it's a bit of, this is actually not at all unlike certain elements of the Holy Grail legend where it's like, or in fact, in a totally random, the same concept as the computer in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where it's like knowing the right question is actually what matters more than knowing the right answer. So it's the element of like what I wouldn't know. It's in fact there's a line in, I do not know, it's a very old book, but it's one of the versions of the Holy Grail legend where Arthur as a young man finds it but realizes that he doesn't know what to do with it yet, so he actually doesn't take it because he's like, the power that this would give me, I don't even know what I would do with, so I'm clearly not ready for it. Whereas then he finds it later after the struggle to find it and he knows now what he needs to be used for. There's an element of like, if someone said to you, you could have whatever you wanted if you just asked, being like, I don't even know what I should ask for. And ultimately that's what Solomon is saying is essentially asking God, tell me what I should ask for. And then essentially because God's impressed with that answer, he's like, okay, I'll give you all the rest of the stuff anyways.
I want the best wisdom of all time. Cut that baby in two. Like,
but see, do you think I don't think he was being serious. I think he absolutely.
Of course not. He knew what was going to happen.
I'm just saying that I do respect that because that's a better way of framing it because you could make the framing of like, oh, I'm a leader and I want to know what to do. But it's like, well, yeah, on one level.
I don't think that was his only motivation.
On a metaphysical level, I think that it's basically saying if you had the capacity, if you were given such an opportunity, you wouldn't know what to do with it.
Right.
So to recognize that you wouldn't know and to therefore say what I
want
is to know.
Right.
And then literally that God basically says that was the right answer because I'm going to give you everything else for free. Mm-hmm. So it's like, well, okay, there you go.
Yeah.
I'm just saying the whole idea of, well, you're going to outlive people. It's like, I'm going to outlive some people anyways. If your only consolation for outliving some members of your family is that other members will outlive you, that's a grim idea. It's like, well, I'm going to outlive some people, but then other people outlive me.
The motivation of like for eternal life? Is that what you're saying?
No, some people say like, wouldn't that be horrible to, you're going to be living forever with all these people you knew dead? And I'm like, well,
you're saying you
but that's going to happen
anyway. Yeah.
It's like, I'm going to outlive some amount of people anyways.
You're going to see some.
If you're only,
you might as well watch them all do it.
Well, it's like if your only consolation is like, yeah, someday I'm going to most likely I'm going to be alive when my parents are gone. But at least my kids will be alive when I'm gone. It's like, if that's your consolation, that's a bit strange. Just think about that for a minute. Whereas I'd be like, okay, yeah, you'd outlive a lot of people, but then you'd just, I don't know. You're going to do that anyways. I don't know. You're going to do that at some point. So that's not as negative as I think people think it is.
My only qualm about the whole vampirism thing is there's always this kind of weird...
is the angst baked in?
Yeah, I mean,
can I not be the angsty vampire?
Can you not be the angsty vampire?
But I think the argument might be: would you end up becoming an angsty vampire? Maybe not angsty, but like brooding probably seems like it would happen. Where you would start to be like, yeah, humanity is just sort of these pets that come and go and die as frequently to me as dogs. Or it's like the average human's lifespan is the same to me as a dog's. So that doesn't mean that you would hate them, but you'd be like, yeah, they kind of have to be viewed as a lesser species. Not lesser necessarily, but like it would be hard not to sort of look down and be like, I am obviously far above you.
Not to sound
The other question is how much of the negative, because obviously some people try to make the vampirism out to be basically there's no downsides. It's like that starts to feel cheap.
No, well, I was about to say that
like,
not to sound cliche, but I feel like
I'm immortal and super powerful and strong.
I feel like wouldn't you not want to live forever if you didn't have somebody to share that with? I mean, it's like.
But the argument would be that again, this is where my caveat is like once I'm done, I'll be like, all right, now I'm going to some random anonymous donor 1,000 years from now is going to be like, hey, here's just a bunch of stuff from the past 1,000 years. I'm a private collector here. Don't ask about where most of it came from. And then just write a note and then just be like, all right, now he's gone. We got an anonymous tip from some random donor gave us, the past 500 years of this random archaeology. Because think about it. You could be the best archaeologist ever. Just because you kept stuff rather than digging it up. Literally, imagine if you were like, yeah,
people digging on sites. It's got to be here. There's more.
Sure, you just send in a bunch of stuff to be like, hey, I've been privately funding my own expeditions of ancient Greek stuff. Here's a whole bunch of things from Troy, and they'll be like, wow, how impressive. Where was your dig site? And then you just never answer letters, and then it turns out you're gone. And the reason is you had all the stuff from Troy, because that's what I do. What your perspective on history would be like. I'm just gonna
get all this stuff. Troy, he's right over there.
I just kept most of it.
I'm joking.
I lived in Troy for a little while. It was nice back. It was a little bit overpopulated.
Making a joke and you stumbled.
It was a dumb joke. I'm continuing to a better joke. But that would be funny. The kind of juxtaposition of the mundane of like, yeah, I lived about 50 years in Troy. It was a little gentrified, but I kept some stuff.
It would be like literally me keeping a paper mate like that I used in high school, and then just
because you never know
later on have a my word, this is an original paper mate.
I kept a bunch of these like pottery and paintings and stuff, and statues. You can have them now. People would be like, these are like 3,000 years old. Be like, are they?
This is an original pottery. He's like, no,
it's an original pottery pot.
I made that one in kindergarten.
Oh, yeah, I was the guy. They asked me to scratch it out and put Xerxes' face on it. That's my handiwork. I was very amateurish then. I was only 400 years. Now, here's a random question. If you could pick your random vampire biography, where would you start it? Because, would you be like...
Location?
Yeah, because there's a part of you that'd be like, well, I'd just start at the beginning, but I'm not sure I would...
At the beginning? What?
I mean, like, you just be like, yeah, okay, put me back in, like, ancient Mesopotamia. Because my thought,
you're talking about like the dawn of.
In some ways, I'm supposing this is sort of a sort of bizarre, and so this could make a very bizarre short story. But like, imagine someone came to you and was like, "Hey, you could be." I mean, at this point, it wouldn't even be a vampire thing. It was like you could just be an immortal. Pick now where you'd like to start, and then you'll have to live all the time from then up until the modern age. It's not just like, oh, suddenly I'm an immortal and I now gain all this memories that I have. It'd be like, no, you actually have to live it out. And I'm like, that would be a lot of boring time.
Would it though?
I think it would because the argument is like, well, maybe some of that history is missing, but like maybe some of that history just wasn't worth talking about.
Well, I'm going to disagree with that.
Maybe I could go to the beginning of the pharaohs in Egypt and be like, all right, because that they were a consistent civilization, so that would be very weird.
In history.
No.
My point is,
we talked about this before. Egypt is nuts. And how old it is.
No, I understand that.
You could literally be like, I'm 6,000 years old and I've lived in Egypt for 5,000 years.
I understand. What I'm saying is the notion of their historicity is the only reason why you're saying that Egypt is where you'd want to be, because you don't know anything about any of the other stuff.
I take perhaps a almost quasi-Darwinian approach where I'm like, the fact that we don't know says to me perhaps there was nothing to know.
Maybe they didn't.
It's a little bit of the Ozymandias thing where I'm like, clearly he wasn't worth much.
Wow.
Because, yeah, we don't know anything about him. Now the idea might be, well, maybe we're missing, but I'm like, or maybe it wasn't worth keeping. I'm not saying that I'm right about this, but there's a part of me that's like, no, it's a little bit of no use crying over spilt sand. I'm like, If nothing survives, perhaps it wasn't worth. Maybe you'd be like, I used to have a library card for Alexandria, and I miss it so much. But
well, for me, see, I feel like I would want to.
That would be a funny. I feel like that would also be another funny story of like the vampire or the immortal who lived in Egypt, and it's like I didn't leave Egypt until like the 1800s when. I guess I should know more about the history, but it's like when I'm not sure when it was that the actual Egyptian sort of people were displaced by the sort of Arabian hordes. But it's like there would be a funny joke to be, because that would be the kind of thing where it's like, yeah, I've been alive for 8,000 years. I really only just left Egypt 200 years ago, because that when it stopped being Egypt. So really, most of my life is entirely Egypt, and I'd be like, that would be a fascinating. It would be a good
Egyptian. No.
I mean like.
like really Egyptian.
Because it would be funny because of just how it would be a good example of just like people don't recognize how crazy old Egypt is. To be like, yeah, you could be an 8,000-year-old vampire who just left Egypt recently because it's no longer Egypt. And then be funny because then you'd have him be like this sort of curmudgeonly old pharaoh apologist.
Pharaoh apologist. Back when Ramses, it's like, okay, whatever you're talking about, Grandpa.
Well, because there was this it's like, it would almost be like being a strict monarchist in England today, where it's like, yeah, there's people who support the royal family, but then it would be like, no, Parliament is an abomination. We should live under the rule of the king alone. It'd be like, imagine being that guy in England, but just imagine being like, all these prime ministers, I want the pharaoh back. Screw this whole presidential nonsense. Where's my God King?
No, I mean, in answer to your question, I feel like I would have to go all the way back to the beginning only because I would want to.
But you'd have to then live through it.
I would, but it wouldn't affect me at all.
I guess that raises the question of would you know about it? Because there's a part of me that would say... I was about to say,
would I have the anticipation of the future? I think
you would have to, because if only then you could put yourself in places on purpose. Be like, okay... I have to give myself time to get to this place when I know what's going to happen so that I can record it.
But you could also just at least have something to look forward to. So it's like, okay, well, this era sucks, but at least we have this coming up.
I'm just going to nap for 300 years until this happens.
You could. That's what I'm saying. You could literally be like just up in the mountains. Yeah, no, today, for the next 300 years, I'm going to be some grouchy old crow in the mountains that just comes down and harasses little children every now and then.
Now you have to write your itinerary. Maybe it's a different way. You don't actually experience it. You just have to write the itinerary, and then suddenly you'll get like all the memories. It's like you'll wake up tomorrow being this immortal, but you have to write down today all of the things you did from the beginning until now. You're like, all right, well, I was born here, and then I traveled here when this would happen, and then I had to travel there for that happen, and then it's like you'd have to plan it out. You'd have to be like, oh crap, they can't be there for both of these things at once. I'm gonna have to pick one. I don't know.
No, he could. I mean,
not really. Not if two things happened at like the same time.
Super speed. I mean that
not across the world. I don't think that. I think there's a limit to that.
Is there though?
I feel like if only for the sake of. That would start to feel a little bit too self-insert. To be like, yes, I just ran at Mach 5 across the ocean so that I could see both the fall of this place and the rise of this other place. I don't know. Maybe that's... Or because I think if you were to say, all right, it's a little bit of the whole question of if you could build the perfect simulation and you would never know, but you know it now going into it, would you still do it? Kind of an ethical question where it's like if someone were to present you could wake up tomorrow living in this sort of simulated life
world
that was exactly what you wanted and you wouldn't know that it wasn't real. Would you make that choice now? Because there's a part of you that goes, knowing that I won't know then does not help me now because I will know now, and I feel like there's an element, at least in my mind, that like I owe it.
Depends on whether realism.
I owe it to myself. I owe it to this version of myself to tell the truth rather than to be like, well, I'm just gonna live. It's a bit of the. I'm just gonna take the blue pill and have the comfortable lie just because I like it better.
I was about to say, I'm like, is bliss nonsense.
Yeah, but there's a reason he's a villain in that movie. It's like because
that's
presented as the inferior choice. So it's a little bit of, imagine you won't know that you're gonna live forever, and you're not gonna know the historical events in that moment, but you know them now. So in that context, you then have to go, okay, I may have thought that I'll just, live through this really boring 300 years in between these two events. But when you're actually in it, you won't know that. So you'll just be like, this is a really boring 300 years.
I got to take my life now. But see, if you had that out and but then it started to get boring, maybe you'd do it too early.
I don't know. I'm not sure that this actually is going to lead to anything productive. I just think
we're just
based on vibes alone. No logic, just going off of vibes. I feel like I would have chosen very swiftly post Great Schism. Because then my bitterness towards the Great Schism would take on a new personal meaning. I was like, I was born 50 years too late to see the United Church. What? You have robbed me of the one holy church. I'll still be bitter about the Catholics to this day, being like, I never got to see the one united Church of Christ. It's your fault.
If I am angry, it's your fault.
You deprived me of the true magisterium.
Got a bunch of Protestants going, what's happened? You happened.
Luther had the chance to join the Orthodox and he failed. I'm just saying because of the fact that that's something that still bothers me, I'm like, I feel like that would have been perfect to be like, I was born just after that. And I am still harboring resentment for him having missed it. Because it would almost be like being in a drastically different context, it'd almost be like being born too young to have actually enlisted in like one of the major world wars, but sort of to be a young man thinking, I wish that I could have
gone out.
I could have done this, but I was just a little bit too late. So imagine just being like, had I been born 20 years earlier, I would have seen the United Church. I'm just saying that existential angst still, I need to give that I need to give an explanation for that.
I think you still actually have that, whether or not you're feeling it.
Secretly, I was a vampire. I also think there's never been a short or any kind of story actually that deals with that well, of like the concept of religious vampirism. It's like, I got turned into a vampire, but I'm like a really devout Catholic and I don't know what to do about that. I can't go to church anymore because it hurts.
Forgive me, Father, I have sinned. What have you done, my son? I'm a vampire.
I don't think that's it's often portrayed as being an like inherently evil thing, but I'm like, what if they were trying hard not to be? Where it's like, I usually ask first before I drink from people.
I usually ask.
I mean, sometimes if it's been a long time, I can't.
Bless you, my son. Look at this crucifix. Ah!
Okay, I had a thought that may or may not be deemed heretical. But I mean, let's take the Catholic tradition literally and be like, well, why do you think I'm so religious about the Eucharist? Just be like, I can assure you it really does turn into blood.
Wow.
I wouldn't be alive if it didn't.
You only do that.
Well, that would make for I'm sure it would be probably put on the banned list, but that would be a fascinating short story about the Catholic vampire who subsists. Even the fact that it makes
subsists solely on
the fact that it makes me laugh is probably why it borders on heresy. But I think that actually could be kind of compelling. It's like, I'm still trying to live the way I ought to, even though this thing has happened to me.
Body in the... What is... Drink from this well and you will never thirst.
I'm just saying it's never... the only... If it exists in fan fiction. I'm not willing to go there. So I want a proper version of this.
Not a religious ukulele ballad.
That's an awful image. Religious. I don't know. What about you?
I genuinely would feel like I'd have to go back to the beginning, the dawn of time, just to even, I mean, like, I would want to, I'm the kind of person, and we've talked about this in the past, that the difference between you and I is that I tend to get lost in the woods a little bit. But you could spend like the first 500
years being an archaeologist. You'd be closer to the time, but not have to live through it.
Yeah, but I don't know. There's something about just being able to have witnessed.
But you wouldn't have witnessed everything.
This seems
like you could have been you could have been like a town away from Troy and been like, "Oh, there was a war going on these past 10 years. I never heard about that. I should have been there.
I never knew this." That's true, I guess. So
because again, the implication is that once
we don't have forethought.
No, well, you do now, but once you're in it, you won't. And there's no like communicate. You can't give yourself a to-do list. Be like, be in Byzantium in 1056.
Are you sure?
I'm stipulating, if we're stipulating that this is some kind of a sci-fi thing, like you can plan it out ahead of time, but you won't know about it once you're in it. Because then I think you'd be like, this is a really boring time to live this long.
Well, I guess it then begs the question, where would you be the most informed?
Well, that's why I think if you
start yourself, I think Egypt then would have to be the place because you would arguably be in the center.
But I think that would turn.
I
feel like you'd turn. But if that's where you started, I think you're setting yourself up for a very strange, egotistical view of the world. Because imagine, like, okay, you were born in Egypt. Because imagine you're born in Egypt in like the 300s BC, 3000s BC rather, and then you live literally. You never have a reason to leave there, so you'd literally just be like, yeah, I'm 8,000 years old. I've been living in Egypt this whole time. I'm an Egyptian ethno-nationalist. The Egyptians are superior to all. Hail the God Emperor. I mean, like, I feel like you're setting yourself up for a very biased view of the world.
He is the morning and the evening star.
Like, even the modern Egyptians don't even know what I'm talking about. Like, you're all faithless curs.
Basket case over there.
I almost feel like this is sort of...
Who are these United States and why are they propagating against us?
We should be ashamed of this parcel of land that we call Egypt. We once ruled the Mediterranean. I almost feel like this is not exactly how it's portrayed, but sort of forget the show, but the actual comic of Moon Knight, the character, who is literally like an Egyptian god, where it's like he's basically unhinged in this way, in exactly this way, where it'd be like, you have no clue the power of the emperor. The pharaoh could smite you with a glance. I think you'd be setting yourself up to be a very strange and very weird pharaonic Hitler.
Pharaonic Hitler. I don't know. I would want to put myself in a place that was centralized enough to all of the historical events that you'd at least hear about them.
Constantinople's not a bad choice.
Sure. You could also do, not Nineveh, what was the one that was just outside of Nineveh? It was...
I don't know.
It started with a name. Atmos? No.
I don't. That's an energy company is all I know.
No, it was... I'm thinking of... Nope, I can't remember.
That's a funny image in my mind. It's just crazy old pharaoh guy. He's still in Egypt to this day, trying to goad revolution. Arab string pops up and be like, "Forget this rabble! We must reclaim the Holy Land." What? Jerusalem? That's not what I'm talking about at all.
Why would we want that?
Jerusalem? What do we need with them? I'm talking about Memphis. Come on.
It's with the people of Yahweh over there.
That's a hilarious idea. Just like, we must reclaim the Holy Land. What's this Jerusalem I keep hearing people talk about? There's a comic. This is totally, I don't know why. This is totally unrelated except for the fact that there's a similar vibe. There's a comic strip someone does of like Plague Doctor in random fantasy land. And so one of them, and it's just this kind of babbling madman essentially. But he talks with like such authority about things that he's just completely uninformed about. And I feel like it's a similar thing where it's like there's one episode where it's like they bring this goblin warrior to him. He's like, he's been shot in the leg. He's like, all right, amputation. And he just pulls out the bone saw and he's like, what are you talking about? What medical school did you go to? And he's just like, medical what? I just imagine you'd be like that. Just, we must serve the God Emperor. Who's this Yahweh they keep talking about? Reclaim the Holy Land. Where's Jerusalem again?
Well, to be fair, though, you also have witnessed the
well, that's true.
The death of all the firstborn in Egypt all of a sudden because of Yahweh.
That would
So it's a bit like, oh wait, yeah, no, that's not cross them.
That almost turns into a sort of Minion-esque.
What?
It almost sounds like the plot of Minions, where it's like we were just always there for our history and be like, oh no, I saw the death of the firstborn in Egypt. Yahweh is the one true God.
You just move in some sort of a migratory route.
You're even more like zealous than even the Jews, being like, no, we cannot turn against the principles of God. Don't you know what they did to their firstborn? That actually,
some Egyptians actually did historically go with the.
Well, I'm sure after what happened, but I'm saying imagine the continuity of like 400 years of judges, and he's just going like, "You faithless fools! Do you forget? Have you forgotten the Red Sea?
I want to go back to Egypt. Get that man out of here."
Except Keychain.
Except Keychain.
Well, because it's true. I mean, as much as they tried to be like, we're going to pass this tradition on, if you lived with it, you'd be like, have you forgotten the plagues? I still bear the scars.
Seriously. I was the firstborn. The only reason I didn't die is because of my fly. I don't know how you'd even say that.
He claimed all the firstborn. He killed my brother. Well, I mean, if you're a vampire, you'd be like, you'd just die and then you get back and be like, what was that about? Never had that happen before.
It's the angel of death.
That implies
I watched my spirit leave my body and then it was returned.
That would almost imply that this whoever gave you this is like an angel that gives you this deal. He like muscles into the angel of death, being like, that guy should have stayed alive. He's like, oh crap, we'll keep putting it back.
It's like
that guy made a deal.
Archangel Michael. Oh yeah, no, he and Michael had a thing.
This guy, we had a deal. You're gonna need to put his bowl back.
That guy right there. Oh gosh, dang it! He just throws it back.
This would be the funniest. Now this needs to be a comic strip of our own. Egyptian madness man.
Madness man, no, because it wouldn't just be Egypt. That's the point. He's gonna start in like the most obscure god.
He's gotta start in Mesopotamia, being like Marduk is the one true. Oh hey, who's this Egyptian guy?
God though, like it's got to be. It would
have to be the Mesopotamians.
Well, yeah, sure.
And it's like, oh, we've been conquered by the Egyptians. Their gods must be stronger.
Raw. He starts doing all these.
That's okay. So perhaps the heresy has gotten enough. Separate. I would just, I don't know, because there is a trend of usually the sort of crazy, nutty characters in a lot of things often end up being the ones people like the most. And I feel like this would be one of those where it's like you could make him into a totally sympathetic character where everyone's like, I mean, he's not wrong. He's lived through all this. He would know more than anyone else.
Right. Well, but it begs the question. I mean, it's a bit of the argument of if you have been a first-hand witness, wouldn't you continue to what is it called? To make sure you were true or faithful to, Yahweh or whatever else it would be. And you're going, not necessarily, though. Like, these people that literally just crossed the Red Sea decided to build a calf and start bowing to it.
But even then, I mean, not to defend, but that short-sightedness, you would be cured of short-sightedness if you lived forever.
Sure, that's
so you'd be like, okay, yeah, I know 2 years might be a long time for you, but this was like yesterday to me. So, like, My feet are still wet from the Red Sea, guys. I don't know what you're talking about. Now
that was like 5 years ago. Yes, would you like me to bring you?
We've been in the desert for 40 years. Whoa. They're totally changing tracks to avoid heresy. Here's a loophole that I found, which some people will probably consider a little bit anticlimactic, but like the whole question of if you could eat dinner with anyone in history, that thing, I'm like, the obvious answer is Christ, isn't it? Because I think most people seem to forget that he was a historical figure. It's like, no, why would that not be? Because then, even if you're not sure that you believe, you'd be like,
people like Elvis. Oh wait, no, dang it, Jesus Christ.
Well, because I feel like, because the question is, okay, sometimes it's asked as like anyone still alive. Then it's like, okay, that's a harder question because that's a limit. But if it's like anyone in history, I'm like, well, isn't it obvious? Because even if you're not sure, like maybe if you're on the fence of like, I'm not sure I believe this, you'd be like, well, I can think of the best, that would be the best way to know.
My version of the historical Jesus is so, I mean, I say my version. Arguably, like my intention is obviously to craft the best version of what I know of the truth of who.
Yeah, but even then I'd be like, throw all that out. I'll just meet him.
Sure, but I find that he's kind of awfully cagey at times.
Well, yeah, but to Pharisees, if you went in, I feel like if you came up to him and was like, he ate with disciples, he ate with sinners. Yeah, but sure. I'm saying if you were just like, I want to know, teach me whatever you have to teach. He wasn't usually rude to actual people who were interested. Of course not. He was sort of cagey with people who rightly should have known better.
Or I'm just saying if you were asking the wrong questions, what's going to happen you don't need to know that, son. It's just...
I'm just saying that seems like the kind of obvious answer that nobody gives. I'm like...
Except he doesn't make it that obvious. The seed does not ask from where it comes.
Well, I just think it's...
Okay.
It seems like the only reason to discount it is because it's almost like you've forgotten that he was an actual historical figure. Like, he was a mythical, so I'm not going to bother talking. I'm like, no, but it would almost be like saying... The only other answer I could almost respect would be a mythical character. Like, okay, I'd like to talk to Achilles if he existed. Because then you'd know and be like, actually, yeah, he was real and I've met him and the myths are right in these aspects and wrong in these aspects. But how much more an important figure in our culture was Christ?
Odysseus.
So to be like, yeah, well, yeah, some of the teachings are embellished, let's say, but these things are definitely true.
I almost wonder though whether like Old Testament period figure would be better. Like if you could like meet like Elisha, like that would be potent. Because I
don't think it would be more potent though.
Because I'm just saying that's somebody who understands the anticipation of
but that's not
the Christ figure.
But if anything, that's no longer our position. If anything, we are in a
agreed, which is why I think it's
a recollection is what we need more. So I'd be like, if I could get that from the source and be like, okay, now I've got I don't know. I'm curious why it hasn't come up because it almost seems like everyone sort of takes it as that's a cop out. And I'm like, why is it a cop out? I mean,
oh, well, that doesn't count. Christ, right here in history.
I took a selfie with him. That obviously wouldn't work because it wouldn't work. Didn't work back then. I'm just saying, yeah, it wouldn't even be for like, I'd finally tell people like, this is what he'd like. It was like, because obviously no one would believe me, but I'm like, just for my own, like, set me straight. What about this am I doing wrong?
Everything.
Well, I'd ask for clarification, but I'd probably accept that prognosis. Like, all right, yeah, granted, but like, what should I do about it? I'm just saying, it seems like why doesn't that come up more?
I don't know. I figure on a modern level or somebody that's alive, what would you...
That's much harder.
It is harder.
Because it's not as interesting. There's not as many people alive who interest me as much as historical.
It's not as interesting, but it's also interesting in that who your choice would be kind of reveals an interesting part of yourself.
Yeah, I mean, strictly alive even limits, because like even if it was the past 200 years, it'd be different. Because I'd be like, okay, I think I could have a fun dinner with Alan Watts. I'd be like, he'd be interesting to talk about. Young would be interesting as well. I don't know about anyone other than that, from the past 200 at least. I mean, in a modern context, people. I'm gonna.
Many interesting people.
Not as many certainly as there have been. This is people are gonna. This will inevitably garner criticism, but I'm somewhat torn. It would be somewhere between Jordan Peterson or Elon Musk for very different reasons.
Interesting. I don't know. I would have said Musk. I definitely would have said.
I find him interesting just because it's a little bit of it's a bit more of a practical like. Tell me about sort of how you organize your life and how you accomplish as much as you do.
Yeah, I mean,
Like, if I wanted to be someone who could change the world as much as you have, what should I be doing now? Because he didn't start doing.
Do you think he would have a cohesive answer, or is he just kind of?
He's pretty thoughtful. The one trouble he always has is that he's not super eloquent. And some people almost say that it's a kind of charming thing because you can tell that it's because he's more of a. He's more of a scientist than a talker.
I mean, again, yeah.
So exactly. It's like you can tell that he's sort of forming his words carefully, and that means they don't come out like super smoothly. And but he's pretty thoughtful about like in interviews. He's been like, yeah, no, this is sort of this was my experience, and as a child, and like that really stuck with me, and that's why I think this thing is important. It's like that would be on a practical level, and some people are going to be like, oh, it's just because you're a fanboy, and I'm like, well. I certainly would. I'd actually pay money to not meet Jeff Bezos, or the other, I don't know his name anymore. I forgot it. Windows guy, Microsoft.
Windows guy. Oh, Bill Gates.
Yeah, him. I'd actually I don't think I would like them very much. If Steve Jobs was alive, I could probably talk about him.
Never talk to them. That would be great.
if I could be invited to the dinner and then pay money to have them not show up. And then obviously Jordan Peterson feels a little.
It feels obvious.
It feels obvious and almost a little bit creepy. Because in that context, I'd be like, I've been watching. I don't know. It feels a little strange because he is still doing the thing for which he's known for.
Right.
Whereas sometimes you'd think, all right, this guy who's very old and he's sort of stopped, but he was alive in the past. I want to talk to him. Because I'd want to get the clear view of his story, but it's like Jordan Peterson's still doing the things for which I appreciate. So it would almost be like just being an awkward fan, and I don't want to be an awkward fan in this interaction.
Yeah.
I don't know what I would. There's less interesting men alive today. I guess that's our bleak
outlook.
Well, I don't know. Because to me, I just like, if you open it up to all history, it's like, well, then if you limited it to like, okay, going back this far, then I'd go, okay, well, now I have to think about the people in that period. But if I could go all the way back to be like, if I could talk to Christ himself, I'd be like, he'd probably straighten a lot of things out in me. Or at least, I mean, there were people who talked to him and didn't get straightened out. So I'm not suggesting that it would like, just to the mere act of speaking would have done it. But I mean, perhaps if you went in with the right reasons.
Sure.
I don't know. I have no clue. What even is the thread of this discussion? I have no clue what I'm going to call this one.
We jumped all around. Vampirism and Christ. That's what you should call it.
Christ and vampirism?
Well, we've talked about the Catholic Church and...
I still think that would just be funny, the Catholic vampire who's like... Because think about it.
That's going to garner some... Seriously, you should call it vampirism and Christ, because people are going to be like, Christ is what now?
I'm just curious because their framing of like the vampire as an inherently like evil thing. I'm not sure how well that applies because the argument of like, well, metaphysically, like the quote unquote, whatever the first vampire would have been if they existed, you could make the argument that it was a supernatural wicked force. But like for people who just get turned into vampires, I'm like, do you deserve to be like, oh, I'm just inherently sinful because this happened to me? Or could you not? Would there be a way of living in accordance with your own? Because I think you could.
I'm a Nazi, but
no, because that's an ideological framework like that. You've accepted a set of ideals where it's like, if this is literally just a biological reality that was forced on you, you'd be like, okay, I didn't ask for this, and I'm trying to not give in to these temptations, but. If anything, I almost feel like you could make a very sincere kind of reflection on the human nature with the exaggeration of a vampire. It's like, y'all humans think it's hard not to sin. Imagine if you had these literal biological needs. If I don't feed on people, I die. Imagine how hard that is to balance with my faith.
Hello, Vladimir. Why are you here again to take the Eucharist? Just give me some more.
I'm not. No, I didn't. The heresy's falling on you. I at least tried to be more. My implication was at least that it's like, I'm reaffirming the Eucharist. I'm just saying
all I'm saying is you'd have a different knowledge of Christ sustaining you. I mean,
you'd be genuinely just like, no, I can. You'd get into arguments with Protestants and be like, no, I can promise you it's true. How do you know? Because I know.
Like that guy with like the vein coming out of his head.
I just think it wouldn't have to be as comedic as it sort of sounds on its face. You could actually tell a very serious story about faith 100%. In the face of temptation. I don't know. It would be certainly more interesting than most Hollywood films coming out today. What?
Got some sort of daydream going on in his head. Just blood sacks and baby blood sacks. What? He's like standing in the church with all these other people that could easily.
Well, but see, then I would say you're sort of in contempt of the faith if you're going to be thinking that. Blood sack. Get my blood sack now. I just think, I don't know. This leads to a whole nother topic. We were talking about the concept of just sort of zealot characters often being interesting in things. Because I think that it's a trope that happens. Not always zealot in a religious sense, although sometimes it is, where it's like there's actually something compelling about people who are that devoted.
Passionate
like even when you don't agree with them on a religious level, it's like they just make interesting characters.
Well, I find even they make interesting people. I've met people that are that devoted on, again, I had that one friend that was a astrologer, and I was like, there are a lot of people that say that they're that, but they don't really, I mean, he was literally on a religious level what he had studied. And it was fascinating, as much as I didn't ever agree, with all of his perspectives, that there was such a dedication to the knowledge of it that I was like, this is interesting. And it did spark, curious discussions. And that, again, I think I told you about that one time that he said something to the effect of, and I know like you don't specifically think stars have any sort of, religious context or whatever.
Of course they do. They just not the religious context.
Well, and that's essentially what I said. I was like, dude, the whole follow the star, and it's like, no, that was definitely something that was used. So, but
I do want to do at some point a playthrough of the Honest Hearts DLC, because you still don't have any clue who Joshua Graham as a character is, and I think you'd
Honest Hearts within.
It's a Fallout New Vegas DLC.
Oh, New Build. Okay.
And I mean. There was a video which I thought was rather interesting. I don't know how indicative is of the average experience, but there is you could argue about the size, but there is a definite there was a definite upsurge in like religious curiosity as directly as a result of this character. And so someone basically made a video essay. It's like this character actually sort of revived many people's faiths, because he's depicted in a very sort of honest way, where it's like. It was almost like he was an actual version of what the sort of mythical idea of a Crusader knight is.
Huh.
But he was actually that way, where it's like, no, I'm solid on the faith, and I will absolutely mess you up if you mess with my people. But for the most part, I'd like us to get along together civilly.
What is it?
Because it's a bit of the Book of Eli thing, where it's like 100%. you don't get those kinds of characters, because oftentimes they're either. I mean, sometimes they're just the butt of the joke, because they're like, sort of Ned Flanders, sort of, aren't they silly? Which is
Ned Flanders. I don't know.
That's,
I mean, I understand.
That's his whole thing, is that they're just the sort of religious loony family. Or they're the sort of corrupt whatevers from pretty much everything. And then sometimes, even when they're genuine, they're often just portrayed as ineffectual, where it's like, no, I actually think it's. To see a religious character be effectual because of their faith, whether or not it's necessarily affirming the truth of their faith, but simply that their faith is what makes them effectual.
Sure.
It's like that. Those make compelling characters, because I think we are in a society that actually longs for people who believe in things.
Well, and
because there's so much like we don't believe in anything, and as a result, none of us have any sense of ambition or drive or passion for anything.
Then you've got these weird people, speaking of the whole history being the three-dimensional weird thing, where you go...
What are you talking about?
No, I'm talking about like within a social media context where because of the fact that there is such a... Anyone can be zealous about any stupid thing because there are no actual passionate people really left. So you go... People get out there and they're basically waving the flag of the cultural zeitgeist of the time, and they're just like, we believe this, and I'm very passionate about it because of this, and they get to where they're putting their foot in their mouth because they don't even know what they're saying. It's like, okay, passion should be informed. How about that?
Mm-hmm. That's,
like even a character like within the biblical narrative, like Peter, I go, a lot of people give him crap because he was a zealot or whatever, but you go, he, on a faith level, was not uneducated. I mean, as much as I know he was a fisherman, it's like they were within that culture, they were fairly well
yeah, they
read.
Yeah.
I mean,
Jewish literacy has always been high.
Right.
Higher than pretty much any other culture, certainly ancient cultures.
And so to look at kind of his perspective, even when I think sometimes the people make a big deal of the whole upper room thing, and okay, Peter was denying Jesus before, and then all of a sudden he's speaking to, multiple thousands of people. It's like, yes, because he misunderstood, and he was in his failure to understand, he was, what's the word? He was a bit not displaced. He was floating about kind of in this state of, I'm not sure where anything is, but I think that was only because of a lack of understanding and knowledge of what Jesus was doing, because you see, obviously in the garden, he's, cutting the guy's ear off and he's trying to defend Jesus on a physical level. And Jesus goes, no, that's not what we're going to do. This has to happen this way in order to, have things be fulfilled. And then when, post resurrection, Jesus interacts with him and he kind of restores him to the fold again in that moment on the beach. That same zeal and passion easily made Peter capable of speaking to multiple thousand people. I think sometimes people go, oh, it was the Spirit. And it's like, yes, but it also was in the identity of who Peter was, and I think we sell that short in that God used Peter and his zeal and his zealousness for his benefit. It's like, I don't know. What I mean? Like zealousness almost in Peter's case becomes like a bad thing. Well,
certainly, that I think is a very postmodern idea, this sort of idea of any passion should be regarded with suspicion because people with passion have been wrong and done great wrong, because there's reasons to be skeptical in that passion is not always an indicator of knowledge or wisdom or any of the things, exactly. But it's so you can't say simply because someone is, they're assured in their beliefs that makes their beliefs correct. But I also don't think it's fair to say that, well, because this person's passionate about their beliefs, we must assume that they're actually wrong or that they've got some nefarious. It's like, that's just as equally wrong of an assumption to make. And if anything, I think the fact that these characters often tend to be the most interesting, even though you would consciously say, well, of course, we don't believe that now, but it's like, but a part of you wants to. A part of you wants to, because you wish you could know the things that this guy says he knows. Or at least have the audacity to dare to be wrong about the things you believe.
Right. That's, to me, more of the...
Because, again, I think, going back to we need to give this random Egyptian guy a name. Call him Mehmet. I don't know, but just, imagine he's just, all this super fervent, Egyptian, what do you call it, mythology, and then suddenly he survives the plagues, and he's like, nope, I was wrong. And then have him to actually be, almost to have him be a little bit like a Paul character, where it's like, do you not know? I was the heretic once. I was forgiven for my arrogance and wrongness.
Well, and it's when other, you see Paul doing it with the Jews of his day, but it's like, they start busting his chops about like, oh, but you don't, anytime anybody stepped into the ring, if you will, on a psychological level with Paul, he's like, yeah, I was a full-on scholar of that. Don't try to argue that with me because I will go there with you. Like, my favorite is...
I was a priest of Ra. Do not argue.
When he smacks the high priest, and then he's like, you just smacked the high priest. And he goes, oh, you're the high priest. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to smack you. But seriously... Like,
what verse is this?
I'll have to find it. I
don't recall Paul assaulting anyone.
I'm looking.
Strong words, maybe, but I don't recall assault. I don't know. So Mehmet comes to mind, so I'm sticking with it. I just think it would that because even then you have a character who's like, yes, I was super zealous about this and I was wrong, and so I accepted it, and now I'm zealous about the new thing that proved me wrong. And the fact that we tend to enjoy such characters seems to suggest that we wish we had that level of. Not even certainty, because it's not even that we know that this person is right, but rather this level of the daring to hold something even if you can't know it's right. Like, there is something to be said. I mean, I guess it's ultimately that's what faith is. It's just like people who have faith actually tend to interest us because we seem to be a culture who wants it, but sort of we're rationally conditioned to think that it's wrong. And it's like, well, but perhaps that's what's wrong, is the conditioning. I don't know. All right, so comic strip. I'm going to work on that. Mehmet the Zealot. I don't know what you call it. The problem is that's awfully early in history to be like, okay, well, he was Egyptian, and then he became
so I got it
Jewish.
I'm sorry.
And then I guess he was Jewish for all of time after that. And then
I got it turned around slightly. So it was Ananias, but he actually commanded that Paul be struck. So Paul got struck, and then he actually rebukes the guy and goes, he's like, how dare you strike me? God's going to strike you, you whitewash, whatever. And then he goes, you're talking to the high priest. And he goes, oh, I'm sorry, brothers. I didn't realize he was the high priest. And then he goes, he is right here. Where is it? So he responds with, then Paul said to him, God is going to strike you, you whitewashed wall. Are you sitting to judge me according to the law, and yet you're contrary to the law when you order me to be struck? And then those who stood there said, would you revile God's high priest? And Paul said, I did not know, brothers, that he was the high priest. For it is written, you shall not speak evil of the ruler of your people. So it's like he acknowledges on a Jewish level. He's like, oh, crap, I didn't mean to do that.
But he is out of line.
It's just, it makes me laugh. I'm like, it's that kind of zeal that goes, look, I know where you're coming from, but you're still off base, And apparently Mehmet would have agreed. What would that kind of a context look like? Some argument with the priests of Ra.
I almost am imagining it more as a form of like ancient TikTokery.
What?
Where you could have in the middle of just having them. Oh, that's very dark.
Wow.
I just had this idea of like in the middle of the 10 plagues, he's trying to be all like, you must believe in the gods of Egypt, they will save us. And then like some firstborn walking by collapses and it's just like, that's how it ends. Then the next video is him talking about like, this Yahweh God is right.
Well, where would the turn have been is the question.
Well, I mean, let's put him as zealous as Pharaoh. It was the firstborn who was like, oh crap.
So it's at the very end.
Oh, he God for real.
He just actually then turned permanently, whereas Pharaoh decided to be stiff-necked. Look, you see the reason I turned? Did you see those Egyptians? They just got swallowed
you can actually just make him actually be one of the priests who tried to match Moses, and he's like, see, I can turn this water to blood. There's the firstborn follows over, and he's like,
no, I ain't doing that.
Okay, well.
Oh, dear. Did you see that guy? He just snapped.
Okay, well, I have no clue what the thread is other than vampirism and...
Look forward to that next comic, folks, because it's coming.
I mean, well, I've never done anything like that, but I actually want to see it now. It would be funny. At least I think it would be funny. Maybe it would only be funny to people like me.
Well, it would be super ultra dark humor. It would be like the kind of like it's a bit of the what's the two alien.
That's not dark, though.
I mean, it's super dry, but also, I mean, I just feel like there would be you'd have to embrace a degree of like, oh.
Well, you'd have to be willing to go there.
Exactly. Buggery pottery.
or even... Okay, that's worse.
That's actually what the comic strip's going to be called.
No. I just had this awful idea where it's like... This means nothing. I, too, could kill the firstborn. He turns around. He's holding a knife behind his back. He's like, watch me as I kill the firstborn. And then he just marches away with a knife.
What?
Well, because I'm just saying that was what they tried to do. Is like they tried to match tried to match the plagues one for one. And then eventually they couldn't. But he's just like doggedly denying that he can't. Whoop. That was the mouse. He's doggedly denying that he can't do it. And so he's just like pulls out a knife. Like...
This is too dark. I was gonna say he's like shanking all these corpses that are already dead. Like, no, that was because of me. I did that.
Wow. Well, that's probably too far.
That's what I'm saying.
That would undermine his redemption arc.
Well, see, to me, it's akin to what they did before because watching the Nile turn to blood and then being like. I mean, again, this is the what is it called? The kind of stylized version from the Prince of Egypt in this particular context. But I mean, something similar I could see happening.
No, they did.
Arguably,
I mean, it is.
Where it's like
it's true that they tried
like,
to.
cool.
Well, the question they have is it's unclear whether or not they tried to do it through illusions or whether or not they had some form of a
to me, illusions
mystical,
is the most compelling argument, but.
The whole snakes out of rods, that's hard to illusory. That'd be a hard illusion to sell.
Not really. I mean,
well, because they had to.
Show.
Yeah, but then they had to actually fight the other snake who was a real snake and ate the other snakes, and they'd be like, oh, crap, how did he do that?
Sure.
They're all thinking it's some kind of like clever puppeteering or marionette, and they're like, what? How did he do that? They're thinking Moses is operating on the same trick, so he's like, ha, I know your tricks, and then it's just like, what is he doing? How'd you get him to do that? Where's your puppeteer, sir?
I'm not saying puppeteer.
Well, whatever marionetting. I mean, that's the only way I can imagine you could do it. It would have to be some...
Pull out a snake.
And then have it be a rod somehow? It's a very well-trained snake.
No, I'm saying initially it was a rod, and then you just flip it in some sort of sleight of hand to be a snake. I mean,
you shove the rod down your sleeve?
Well, I'm just saying.
You have to hold your arms out the whole time, though.
Hurrah! Now don't make me turn around.
I can't turn around until I have to pick up the snake. Then the snake gets eaten, and he's like, oh, crap.
Now it's just stuck like this. Dude, this needs to be a comic. Just like the untold history of God coming into contact with other historical figures. Who was the Assyrian king actually when
You're the one watching these 3-hour videos.
When Jonah went to Nineveh? I actually don't know. I think it was oh gosh.
I just think this would be funny because you could use a modern Vine like TikTok attitude, but just apply it to these. So just create storyboards for like what a Vine from this time period would have looked like.
Vine is not a thing though anymore.
Well, that's basically all TikTok is now is Vines. It's just.
Well, yeah, that's true.
Just draw them out as these sort of like. I don't know. I'm trying to think of other examples that. I don't know. I'd have to go ahead. I'm going to have to start reading through biblical stories with an eye for this storyboarding idea. Anyway, well, I guess that's it. Ooh.
There you go.
Well, I got no clue what the thread is on this one. I guess we'll call it something heretical.
That's what we'll call it.
Just something.
That's pretty much what it's been.